The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine grounds of Kensington Palace as 8-year-old Princess Charlotte walked alongside her security detail toward the main entrance. Her small hand gripped the strap of her school bag tightly, a nervous habit she had developed over the past few months. The young princess had always been observant, perhaps more so than other children her age, but lately, she found herself noticing things that made her uncomfortable in ways she couldn't quite explain. Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews adjusted her earpiece as she maintained her position 3 steps behind the princess. At 34, Sarah had been part of the Royal Protection Unit for nearly a decade, but protecting the Wales children required a different kind of vigilance. Children were unpredictable, spontaneous, and often unaware of the dangers that surrounded them simply by virtue of their birth. Charlotte, however, was different. Sarah had noticed it from the beginning of her assignment 6 months ago. The girl possessed an almost uncanny ability to sense when something wasn't right. The palace staff moved with their usual efficiency, preparing for what appeared to be a routine morning. Mrs. Elizabeth Hartwell, the head housekeeper, directed the cleaning staff with practiced precision while keeping one eye on the entrance where visitors would soon begin arriving. Today's schedule included several routine appointments, including a representative from a children's charity that had requested a brief audience with the princess to present her with a special recognition award for her involvement in their recent fundraising campaign. Charlotte paused at the bottom of the grand staircase, her blue eyes scanning the foyer with an intensity that seemed far beyond her years. Something felt different today, though she couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. The familiar sounds of the palace seemed somehow muted, and there was a tension in the air that made her skin prickle with unease. "Your Royal Highness," came the gentle voice of Ms. Rebecca Chun, her private tutor, approaching from the drawing room. "We have about 20 minutes before your appointment with the charity representative. Would you like to review the notes about their organization?" Charlotte nodded absently, her attention still focused on the entrance where she could see additional security personnel positioning themselves. This wasn't unusual, but there seemed to be more of them than normal, and they were being more discreet about their presence. Her father had taught her to always be aware of her surroundings, a lesson that had become second nature to her. The charity representative, Mr. James Morrison, arrived precisely on time, escorted by 2 junior security officers. He was a tall, thin man in his 50s with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He carried himself with the careful deference expected when visiting royalty, but Charlotte noticed something in his eyes that didn't match his respectful demeanor. There was a sharpness there, an intensity that made her instinctively step closer to Detective Inspector Matthews. "Your Royal Highness," Mr. Morrison said with a deep bow, "it is truly an honor to meet you. The Children's Future Foundation is incredibly grateful for your support of our literacy program." Charlotte curtsied politely, as she had been taught, but her eyes never left the man's face. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Morrison. I'm glad the program has been helping children learn to read better." The formal sitting room had been prepared for the brief ceremony. Fresh flowers adorned the side tables, and the morning light streamed through the tall windows, creating an atmosphere of warmth and elegance. Mr. Morrison was invited to sit across from Charlotte, while her tutor and Detective Inspector Matthews positioned themselves nearby. "I have something very special for you," Mr. Morrison said, reaching into his briefcase with movements that seemed slightly too deliberate, too practiced. "This is a commemorative crystal globe, specially crafted to honor your contribution to children's literacy. It represents the world of knowledge that opens up when children learn to read." As he lifted the globe from his case, Charlotte felt her breath catch. The object was beautiful, certainly, with intricate etchings and a small plaque bearing her name. But something about the way he handled it, the way his fingers seemed to press against specific points on its surface, triggered every instinct she had developed about reading people and situations. Detective Inspector Matthews had noticed it too. Her years of training had taught her to watch not just for obvious threats, but for subtle anomalies in behavior and body language. Mr. Morrison's credentials had been thoroughly vetted, his background checked and rechecked, yet something about his presence felt off. The way he avoided direct eye contact while speaking, the slight tremor in his hands that didn't match his confident voice, the fact that he seemed more focused on the gift than on the princess herself. Charlotte accepted the globe with both hands, feeling its surprising weight. As she lifted it to examine the beautiful etchings more closely, she noticed something that made her heart skip. There were tiny, almost invisible seams in the crystal that didn't look like natural patterns in the glass. They looked deliberate, functional, as if the globe could be opened or accessed somehow. Her mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing without alerting Mr. Morrison to her suspicions. She had been taught about the various ways people might try to harm or exploit the royal family, lessons that had seemed almost like spy games when she was younger, but now felt frighteningly relevant. "It's very beautiful," she said carefully, turning the globe in her hands to get a better look at the seams. "The craftsmanship is remarkable. How long did it take to make?" "Several weeks," Mr. Morrison replied, his voice carrying a note of pride that seemed genuine. "Our artisans wanted to ensure it was perfect for such an important presentation." Charlotte nodded, continuing to examine the globe, while her mind worked to figure out how to communicate her concerns without causing alarm. She had been trained in basic security protocols, including discreet signals she could use if she ever felt unsafe or suspicious about a situation. The challenge was implementing them without appearing rude or alarming an innocent visitor if her suspicions were wrong. Detective Inspector Matthews watched the interaction carefully, noting the subtle changes in Charlotte's body language. The princess had straightened slightly in her chair, and her grip on the globe had shifted from casual examination to something more protective, as if she were trying to control or contain it. These were not the actions of a child, simply admiring a gift. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Mr. Morrison explaining the charity's work and Charlotte asking polite questions. But underneath the civilized exchange, tension was building. Charlotte found herself focusing on every word, every gesture, looking for clues about Mr. Morrison's true intentions. When he mentioned that the globe had a special surprise inside that would be revealed later, Charlotte's suspicions crystallized into near certainty that something was wrong. The way he said it, with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes, convinced her that she needed to act on her instincts. As the formal presentation concluded and photographs were taken for the charity's records, Charlotte made her decision. She had been taught that when in doubt, it was better to err on the side of caution, especially in her position. The weight of responsibility she carried, even at 8 years old, was something she had gradually come to understand and accept. Standing to thank Mr. Morrison for his visit, Charlotte positioned herself so that Detective Inspector Matthews could clearly see her hands. With movements that appeared to be simple fidgeting with her dress, she began to implement the signal she had been taught for situations where she felt uncertain about someone's intentions but wasn't in immediate danger. The signal was subtle, a specific pattern of touching her collar and smoothing her skirt that would be meaningless to anyone not trained to recognize it. But Detective Inspector Matthews caught it immediately, her own posture shifting almost imperceptibly as she acknowledged the princess's concern. "Thank you so much for this wonderful gift, Mr. Morrison," Charlotte said, her voice maintaining its polite, formal tone even as her heart raced. "I'll treasure it always." As the visit concluded and Mr. Morrison was escorted out, Charlotte remained in the sitting room with her tutor and Detective Inspector Matthews, the crystal globe still in her hands. The weight of it seemed to have increased, and her suspicions about its true nature had only grown stronger during the encounter. "Your Royal Highness," Detective Inspector Matthews said quietly, moving closer to Charlotte. "Is everything all right? You seemed a bit uncomfortable during the meeting." Charlotte looked up at the detective, her young face serious beyond her years. "There's something about that globe that doesn't feel right. The way he talked about it, the way it's made, I think there might be something hidden inside it." The admission hung in the air between them, a moment of truth that would determine how seriously the adults around her would take her instincts. Charlotte had learned that being young often meant being dismissed, but she hoped that her careful observation and the trust she had built with her security detail would give weight to her concerns. Detective Inspector Matthews studied the globe in Charlotte's hands, noting the same irregularities in the crystal that had caught the princess's attention. Her training kicked in, protocols for handling suspicious items flooding her mind, even as she worked to keep the situation calm and controlled. "I think," she said carefully, "we should have this examined more closely, just to be safe. Your instincts are usually very good, and it's always better to be cautious." Charlotte felt a wave of relief wash over her. Her concerns were being taken seriously, and the adults around her trusted her judgment enough to act on it. This validation meant more to her than she could express, especially given the weight of responsibility she felt in potentially identifying a threat to her family or herself. As Detective Inspector Matthews carefully took possession of the globe and began making discreet calls to the bomb disposal unit, Charlotte reflected on the morning's events. She had trusted her instincts, communicated her concerns appropriately, and potentially prevented something terrible from happening. The realization was both empowering and sobering for someone so young. The investigation that would follow would reveal whether her suspicions were justified, but regardless of the outcome, Charlotte knew she had done the right thing. In a world where threats could come disguised as gifts and enemies could wear the faces of friends, her ability to sense danger and communicate effectively with her security team might be the most valuable protection she possessed. The morning sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting shorter shadows across the palace grounds, but the day had already proven that even routine events could harbor unexpected dangers. For Princess Charlotte, it was another lesson in the complex reality of her life, where vigilance and intuition were not just useful skills, but potentially life-saving necessities. Within minutes of Detective Inspector Matthews' discreet call, the atmosphere at Kensington Palace shifted from routine calm to controlled urgency. The explosive ordnance disposal team arrived in an unmarked van, their presence camouflaged by the constant flow of service vehicles that typically visited the palace grounds. Charlotte watched from the window of her private study as the specialists, dressed in plain clothes to avoid attracting attention, made their way toward the service entrance. Commander David Whitmore, head of the palace's security operations, arrived shortly after the bomb disposal team. His usually composed demeanor carried an edge of tension that Charlotte had learned to recognize over the years. At 48, Whitmore had spent his entire career in law enforcement and security, with the last 12 years dedicated to protecting the royal family. He had developed a deep respect for Charlotte's intuitive abilities, having witnessed several instances where her observations had proven remarkably accurate. "Your Royal Highness," Commander Whitmore said as he entered the study, his voice carrying both concern and reassurance. "Detective Inspector Matthews has briefed me on your observations about the gift. I want you to know that we're taking your concerns very seriously, and we're going to examine the item thoroughly." Charlotte nodded, grateful for his straightforward approach. She had always appreciated that Commander Whitmore never spoke down to her or dismissed her concerns because of her age. The man who brought it, Mr. Morrison, seemed different somehow. Not necessarily bad, but careful in a way that didn't match what he was saying. "Can you elaborate on that?" Whitmore asked, settling into the chair across from her. "What specifically made you feel that way?" Charlotte thought for a moment, trying to articulate feelings and observations that were more instinctual than analytical. When he talked about the charity and helping children, his words sounded right, but his eyes didn't look happy about it. And when he handled the globe, he touched it like he knew exactly where to put his fingers, as if he had practiced it many times. Ms. Chun, who had been quietly observing the conversation, added her own observations. "I noticed that Mr. Morrison seemed more focused on ensuring the princess handled the globe in a specific way rather than engaging in natural conversation about the charity's work. It struck me as unusual for someone supposedly passionate about their cause." Meanwhile, in the palace's secure examination room, the bomb disposal team was conducting their initial assessment of the crystal globe. Sergeant Technical Officer Lisa Park, a veteran of 15 years in explosive ordnance disposal, carefully placed the item under high-resolution imaging equipment. What she saw confirmed Princess Charlotte's suspicions in the most alarming way possible. "Commander," she said into her radio, We have a positive identification. The item contains electronic components and what appears to be a small explosive device. Requesting immediate lockdown protocols. The words crackled through Whitmore's earpiece, and Charlotte saw his expression harden. While the princess couldn't hear the exact words, his reaction told her everything she needed to know about the validation of her instincts. "Your Royal Highness," Whitmore said, his voice calm but urgent, "we need to implement some security measures immediately. Your observations were absolutely correct, and we're going to need to take several precautions while we investigate this situation fully." Charlotte felt a mixture of vindication and fear wash over her. Being right about the danger meant that she and potentially her family had been in real peril. The weight of that realization settled on her shoulders as palace staff began implementing emergency protocols with practiced efficiency. The Prince and Princess of Wales were immediately contacted and briefed on the situation. Within an hour, they had altered their schedules and returned to the palace to be with their children. Charlotte's brothers, Prince George and Prince Louis, were quietly brought home from their respective activities, with their security details maintaining the appearance of normal scheduled changes to avoid alerting anyone who might be monitoring the family's movements. In the secure examination room, the bomb disposal team was meticulously documenting every aspect of the device hidden within a crystal globe. The craftsmanship was sophisticated, designed to blend seamlessly with the legitimate gift while concealing a small but potentially deadly explosive charge. More concerning was the discovery of electronic components that suggested the device could be remotely activated. "This isn't the work of an amateur," Sergeant Park reported to the investigation team that was rapidly assembling. The integration of the explosive components with the crystal structure required significant planning and expertise. Someone invested considerable time and resources into creating this. Detective Chief Inspector Michael Reynolds from the Metropolitan Police's counterterrorism unit had arrived to coordinate with the palace security team. His experience investigating threats against high-profile targets told him that this was likely part of a larger operation, not an isolated incident. Charlotte remained in the secure area of the palace with her family, but her mind was racing with questions about Mr. Morrison and the charity he claimed to represent. She found herself replaying every moment of their interaction, analyzing his words and behavior for additional clues that might help the investigation. "Mummy," she said to the Princess of Wales, "what if Mr. Morrison isn't really from the charity? What if he just pretended to be to get close enough to give me the glow?" Her mother's expression grew serious as she considered the implications of Charlotte's question. "That's a very astute observation, darling. The investigators will certainly look into Mr. Morrison's background and verify his connection to the charity." Indeed, that investigation was already underway. Detective Chief Inspector Reynolds had dispatched officers to the Children's Future Foundation's offices, only to discover that while the charity was legitimate, they had no record of sending anyone to present Princess Charlotte with an award. More alarming, their record showed no employee named James Morrison, and no one at the organization had any knowledge of the planned visit. The revelation that Mr. Morrison had used a false identity to gain access to the palace sent shockwaves through the security teams. Palace protection protocols were among the most rigorous in the world, yet someone had successfully penetrated them using sophisticated deception and forged credentials. As the investigation expanded, additional disturbing details emerged. The appointment had been scheduled through a series of phone calls and emails that had been expertly crafted to appear legitimate. The documentation provided to support Mr. Morrison's identity had been convincing enough to pass initial security screening, suggesting access to high-quality forging capabilities or potentially compromised systems. Charlotte found herself at the center of briefings and discussions that would normally be far beyond the scope of a child's involvement. However, her crucial role in identifying the threat and her detailed observations of the suspect made her input invaluable to the investigation. "Can you remember anything else about how Mr. Morrison behaved or spoke that seemed unusual?" Detective Chief Inspector Reynolds asked during a carefully structured interview designed to extract information without traumatizing the young princess. Charlotte closed her eyes, replaying the encounter in her memory. He knew too much about the palace layout. When he was waiting in the foyer, I saw him looking around, but not like a visitor who was impressed or curious. He was looking like he was checking to make sure things were where he expected them to be. This observation led investigators to examine security footage from Mr. Morrison's visit and earlier reconnaissance activities. What they discovered was chilling. Evidence that the suspect had visited the palace grounds on at least 2 previous occasions, disguised as different service personnel, mapping security positions, and timing guard rotations. The Prince of Wales took his daughter aside that evening, his pride in her actions mixed with concern about the burden of responsibility she had been forced to carry. "Charlotte, you may have saved lives today with your quick thinking and bravery, but I want you to know that keeping you safe is our job, not yours." Charlotte looked up at her father with eyes that seemed far older than her 8 years. "I know, Papa, but if I see something that doesn't feel right, I should still say something, shouldn't I?" "Absolutely," he replied, pulling her into a hug. "Your instincts and your courage are remarkable gifts, and today they protected not just you, but potentially many others." As night fell over Kensington Palace, the investigation continued. The bomb disposal team had successfully neutralized the device, revealing a sophisticated piece of equipment that could have caused significant damage and casualties. The electronic components suggested it was designed to be activated during a future event, possibly when Charlotte was in a crowded public space. The implications were staggering. If Charlotte hadn't trusted her instincts and communicated her concerns, the device could have remained undetected until it was activated, potentially during a school event, public appearance, or family gathering. The loss of life could have been catastrophic. Commander Whitmore reviewed the day's events with a mixture of professional satisfaction and deep concern. While the immediate threat had been neutralized and the plot uncovered, the sophistication of the operation suggested they were dealing with a well-resourced and highly motivated threat actor. The investigation was expanding to examine Mr. Morrison's background, the source of his forged credentials, and any potential connections to known terrorist organizations or criminal networks. International intelligence agencies were being contacted to determine if similar operations might be underway, targeting other high-profile individuals or families. For Charlotte, the day had been a crash course in the realities of the threats that surrounded her family. While she had always known that security was important, the discovery that someone had successfully infiltrated palace security with the intent to harm her brought the dangers into sharp focus. Despite the trauma of the experience, Charlotte felt a sense of empowerment in knowing that her instincts and training had proven effective. She had trusted her feelings, communicated appropriately with her security team, and potentially prevented a tragedy. The validation of her concerns by the adults around her reinforced her confidence in her ability to contribute to her own safety and that of her family. As she prepared for bed that night, Charlotte reflected on the strange turn her day had taken. What had started as a routine charity visit had revealed a complex plot against her family and demonstrated the importance of vigilance even in seemingly safe situations. The investigation would continue for days and weeks to come, but the most critical elements had already been established. The threat had been identified and neutralized, the perpetrator had been exposed, and the security vulnerabilities that allowed the plot to advance had been identified and would be addressed. Charlotte's role in uncovering the plot would remain confidential to protect both her privacy and the ongoing investigation, but within the close-knit community of palace security and royal protection, her actions had earned a level of respect and admiration typically reserved for seasoned professionals. The crystal globe, now harmless and thoroughly examined, would become evidence in what promised to be a complex prosecution. But for Charlotte, it would always serve as a reminder of the importance of trusting her instincts and the value of the training she had received in recognizing and responding to potential threats. The network revealed 3 days after the discovery of the explosive device. The investigation had expanded far beyond the walls of Kensington Palace. Detective Chief Inspector Reynolds found himself coordinating with agencies across multiple countries as the scope of the plot began to reveal itself. The man who had called himself James Morrison had vanished without a trace, but the digital footprint left behind by his operation painted a picture of a sophisticated international conspiracy. Charlotte had returned to her normal routine as much as possible, but the enhanced security measures were impossible to ignore. Additional plainclothes officers have been integrated into the palace staff, security sweeps were conducted more frequently, and every visitor now underwent even more rigorous background checks. The young princess noticed these changes but understood their necessity. "Your Royal Highness," Detective Inspector Matthews said during one of their morning security briefings, "we've discovered some information about the group responsible for the attack attempt. It appears to be part of a larger network that has been planning coordinated actions against several high-profile targets." Charlotte sat forward in her chair, her attention focused intently on the detective's words. Over the past few days, she had been included in selected briefings about the investigation, both because of her central role in uncovering the plot and because the adults around her recognized her remarkable maturity in handling the situation. "Are other people in danger?" Charlotte asked, her concern extending beyond her own family to others who might be targeted. "We're working with security services in several countries to ensure that potential targets are protected," Matthews replied. "Your actions in identifying the threat have actually helped us prevent what could have been a series of coordinated attacks." The revelation that her quick thinking had implications beyond her own safety filled Charlotte with a complex mixture of emotions. Pride at having potentially saved multiple lives was tempered by the sobering realization of how close she and others had come to tragedy. Meanwhile, in a secure facility in London, forensic analysts were making breakthrough discoveries about the crystal globe and its hidden components. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a leading expert in explosive device analysis, had been examining the sophisticated engineering that had gone into creating the weapon. "This is some of the most advanced work I've seen," she reported to the investigative team. "The explosive compound is military-grade, and the electronic triggering system uses encrypted communication protocols that suggest state-level resources or access to advanced criminal networks." The implications were staggering. This wasn't the work of a lone wolf or small extremist group. The resources, planning, and technical expertise required indicated a well-funded organization with significant capabilities and potentially international connections. Agent Patricia Fleming from the Security Service had been assigned as the lead investigator into the network behind the attack. Her analysis of the communications intercepts and digital evidence was revealing a pattern of activities across Europe and North America that suggested a coordinated campaign against high-profile targets. "We're looking at what appears to be a systematic effort to target prominent families and individuals," she briefed the joint task force that had been assembled. The attack against Princess Charlotte was likely intended to be the first in a series of actions designed to create maximum psychological impact. Charlotte's parents had been struggling with how much information to share with their daughter about the broader implications of the threat she had helped uncover. While they wanted to protect her childhood innocence, they also recognized her right to understand the significance of the situation and her remarkable contribution to preventing tragedy. "Darling," the Princess of Wales said during a quiet moment together, "the investigators have told us that your quick thinking may have helped protect other families besides our own. The people who tried to hurt you were planning to hurt others too." Charlotte absorbed this information with the same serious attention she had given to everything related to the incident. "I'm glad I trusted my feelings about the globe then. Even if I had been wrong, it would have been better than letting something terrible happen." Her response demonstrated a level of emotional maturity that continued to impress the adults around her. Rather than being traumatized by the attempt on her life or overwhelmed by the broader implications, Charlotte seemed to be processing the experience as a learning opportunity and a chance to contribute meaningfully to protecting others. The international investigation was yielding additional concerning discoveries. Similar reconnaissance activities had been observed at locations associated with prominent political families in Germany and France. Security footage from these locations showed individuals who appeared to be conducting the same type of systematic surveillance that James Morrison had performed at Kensington Palace. Commander Whitmore was coordinating with international security agencies to share intelligence and coordinate protective measures. The discovery that Charlotte's case was part of a broader pattern had elevated the investigation to the highest levels of government and international law enforcement. We're dealing with an organization that has been planning these operations for months, possibly years, he reported to the Prince and Princess of Wales during a secure briefing. The sophistication of their approach suggests significant resources and inside knowledge of security protocols. This revelation was particularly troubling because it implied that the network had either infiltrated security agencies or had access to classified information about protective measures. The implications for the safety of not just the royal family, but other protected individuals were severe. Charlotte found herself thinking about the other families who might be facing similar threats. During her evening prayers, she had begun including requests for their protection and for the investigators to successfully identify and stop the people responsible for the plots. Her emotional resilience in the face of such a serious threat had become a source of inspiration for the adults working to protect her and investigate the case. Detective Inspector Matthews often found herself amazed by the princess's ability to maintain her normal activities while remaining alert to potential dangers. She has this remarkable ability to be both completely normal and extraordinarily vigilant at the same time, Matthews observed to Commander Whitmore. Most adults would be paralyzed by the knowledge of what they had experienced, but she seems to be using it as motivation to be even more aware and helpful. The investigation had also revealed disturbing details about how the attackers had obtained information about palace security procedures and Charlotte's schedule. The level of detail in their planning suggested access to inside information that should have been available only to a small number of trusted individuals. This discovery prompted a comprehensive review of personnel security clearances and access protocols. Every individual with knowledge of royal family schedules and security arrangements was subjected to renewed background investigations and polygraph examinations. The process was emotionally difficult for many longtime staff members who found themselves under suspicion despite years of faithful service. Charlotte, observing the impact on people she had known since childhood, expressed concern about the effect of the investigation on innocent individuals. It must be very hard for Mrs. Hartwell and the others to have their loyalty questioned, she mentioned to her father. They've been taking care of our family for so long. Her empathy for the palace staff demonstrated another aspect of her remarkable emotional maturity. Even while processing her own experience as a target of attack, she remained concerned about the welfare of others who were being affected by the investigation. The Prince of Wales used this as an opportunity to discuss with Charlotte the difficult balance between security and trust that defined much of royal life. Sometimes protecting people requires making difficult choices that can hurt the feelings of people we care about, he explained. But everyone understands that we have to be very careful to keep you and your brothers safe. As the investigation continued, additional technical analysis of the crystal globe was revealing even more sophisticated elements of the plot. The device had been designed not just to cause immediate harm, but to maximize psychological impact through the timing and location of its activation. They were planning to detonate this during a public event, Dr. Mitchell reported. The electronic components include a GPS tracking system and a timer that could be synchronized with public schedules. They wanted maximum casualties and maximum media attention. The revelation that the attack was designed for such calculated psychological impact added another layer of disturbing sophistication to the plot. This wasn't just about harming Charlotte or her family. It was about creating terror and undermining public confidence in the security of prominent individuals and institutions. Charlotte's role in preventing not just physical harm, but also this broader psychological attack gave additional significance to her actions. By trusting her instincts and communicating her concerns, she had prevented what could have been a devastating blow to public morale and international stability. The young princess was beginning to understand that her position carried responsibilities beyond her own safety and that of her immediate family. The attempted attack had demonstrated how threats against the royal family could have far-reaching implications for national security and international relations. Despite the heavy weight of these realizations, Charlotte continued to demonstrate remarkable resilience and maturity. She maintained her focus on her studies, her relationships with friends and family, and her various charitable interests while remaining appropriately vigilant about security concerns. Her ability to process such traumatic information without becoming paralyzed by fear or overwhelmed by responsibility impressed everyone involved in her protection and education. The counselors who had been made available to help her work through the emotional impact of the experience found themselves dealing with a child who seemed to be handling the situation better than many adults would. She has this remarkable ability to compartmentalize, observed Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the child psychologist who had been consulted to ensure Charlotte's emotional well-being. She understands the seriousness of what happened, but she's not letting it define her or limit her engagement with life. As the investigation expanded internationally and additional suspects were identified, Charlotte found herself occasionally called upon to review photographs and security footage to see if she recognized anyone else who might have been conducting surveillance or reconnaissance around the palace. Her observational skills, which had proven so crucial in identifying the initial threat, continued to provide valuable assistance to the investigation. She was able to identify 2 additional individuals who had been present at palace events in recent months and whose behavior had struck her as somewhat unusual. These identifications led to additional breakthroughs in understanding the scope and timeline of the plot against her family and other targets. The network had been conducting surveillance and planning for far longer than initially suspected, with some evidence suggesting preparations had begun nearly 2 years earlier. The scope and sophistication of the conspiracy continued to astound investigators as they uncovered additional layers of the plot. What had begun with Charlotte's instinctive recognition of something wrong with a seemingly innocent gift had revealed an international conspiracy with implications for security services and protected individuals across multiple countries. Through it all, Charlotte remained focused on her role as both a protected individual and an active participant in ensuring her own safety and that of others. Her experience had transformed her understanding of the world around her, while reinforcing her confidence in her ability to contribute meaningfully to addressing serious challenges. #Resolution and New beginnings 6 weeks after Charlotte's fateful encounter with a man calling himself James Morrison. The investigation had reached a turning point. The International Task Force, coordinated by Detective Chief Inspector Reynolds, had successfully identified and apprehended 7 members of what they had designated as the Crystal Network, a sophisticated terrorist organization with cells operating across 4 countries. Charlotte sat in the secure briefing room at Kensington Palace, flanked by her parents and key members of her security detail. At 9 years old now, having celebrated a birthday during the height of the investigation, she had become an integral part of the task force's understanding of how the network operated and how their plot had been constructed. "Your Royal Highness," Agent Fleming began, addressing Charlotte directly. "We wanted you to know that the last of the individuals involved in the plot against you and your family has been taken into custody. The immediate threat has been completely eliminated." Charlotte nodded solemnly, processing this information with the same careful attention she had given to every briefing throughout the investigation. "What will happen to them now?" she asked, her voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than vindictiveness. "They'll face trial for conspiracy to commit terrorism and attempted murder," Detective Chief Inspector Reynolds explained. "The evidence we've gathered, much of it starting with your initial observations, will ensure that they're held accountable for their actions and prevented from harming anyone else." The man who had infiltrated the palace as James Morrison had been identified as Marcus Kellerman, a former military explosives expert who had been recruited by the Crystal Network after being discharged from service. His expertise in both surveillance and explosive devices had made him a valuable asset to the organization's planned campaign of attacks. The network's ultimate goal, investigators had discovered, was to destabilize confidence in the security of prominent democratic institutions by demonstrating their ability to penetrate even the most protected environments. The royal family had been selected as their primary target because of the symbolic value and international attention such an attack would generate. "It's important for you to understand," Commander Whitmore said to Charlotte, "that your quick thinking didn't just save lives. It prevented these people from achieving their broader goal of making people afraid and undermining trust in our institutions." Charlotte considered this carefully. Over the weeks since the incident, she had come to understand that her role in society carried responsibilities beyond her personal conduct. The attempt on her life had been as much an attack on what she represented as on her personally. "I'm glad I could help stop them," she said finally. "But I also want to make sure I keep learning how to recognize these kinds of situations so I can help protect other people too." Her response demonstrated the remarkable transformation that had occurred in her understanding of her role and responsibilities. Rather than being traumatized by the experience, Charlotte had emerged with a deeper appreciation for the importance of vigilance and a desire to contribute actively to preventing similar threats. The Prince and Princess of Wales had watched their daughter's growth throughout this ordeal with a mixture of pride and concern. While they admired her resilience and maturity, they were also acutely aware of how much childhood innocence had been lost in the process. "We're incredibly proud of how you handled this situation," her mother said, "but we also want to make sure you have space to be a normal 9-year-old girl. You shouldn't have to carry the weight of protecting everyone around you." Charlotte smiled at her mother's concern. "I know, Mummy. I still want to do normal things and have fun with George and Louis. But I also learned that I'm good at noticing when things aren't right, and that can help keep people safe." The investigation had revealed that Charlotte's natural observational skills were indeed exceptional. Child development experts who had been consulted during the process had confirmed that her ability to read people and situations was well beyond typical for her age group. Dr. Walsh, the child psychologist, had worked with Charlotte throughout the investigation to help her process the experience in a healthy way. "She has a remarkable combination of intuitive intelligence and emotional resilience," she reported to Charlotte's parents. "Rather than being damaged by this experience, she seems to have been empowered by it." The security enhancements that had been implemented at the palace and around the royal family would remain in place, but they had been refined based on lessons learned from how the Crystal Network had penetrated existing defenses. Charlotte's input had been valuable in designing new protocols that balanced security with the family's desire to maintain some normalcy in their daily lives. One of the most significant changes was the establishment of a new communication protocol that allowed Charlotte and her brothers to report security concerns directly to their protection team, without going through multiple layers of bureaucracy. The delay that could have occurred if Charlotte had needed to work through her tutor or other staff to communicate her concerns about Morrison could have been catastrophic. "We learned that children can be incredibly effective at spotting threats that adults might miss," Detective Inspector Matthews observed. "Their lack of preconceptions about what's normal actually gives them advantages in recognizing when something doesn't fit." Charlotte had been invited to participate in the development of new training materials for royal protection officers, sharing her insights about how children process and communicate security concerns. Her contribution to professional training protocols was unprecedented for someone her age, but was considered invaluable by the experts developing the materials. The international cooperation that had developed during the investigation had also led to enhanced intelligence sharing between security services in different countries. The Crystal Network's use of sophisticated communication and coordination methods had exposed vulnerabilities in how agencies shared information about potential threats to protected individuals. Charlotte's case had become a textbook example of how early threat recognition could prevent catastrophic attacks. Her story, with identifying details changed to protect her privacy, was being used in training programs for security professionals around the world. As the legal proceedings against the Crystal Network members began, Charlotte was carefully prepared for the possibility that she might need to testify about her encounter with Kellerman. The prospect was daunting, but she approached it with the same courage and sense of responsibility that had characterized her response throughout the investigation. If telling my story in court helps make sure these people can't hurt anyone else, then that's what I need to do, she said when the possibility was discussed. I'm not afraid of them anymore. The transformation in Charlotte's confidence and self-assurance was remarkable to everyone who knew her. While she remained a normal child in most respects, the experience had given her a mature understanding of her own capabilities and a sense of purpose that seemed to guide her decisions and actions. Her relationship with her security detail had also evolved. Where once the protection officers had been somewhat distant figures ensuring her safety, Charlotte now saw them as partners in her own protection. She had learned to communicate effectively with them and to trust their judgment while also contributing her own observations and insights. She's become an active participant in her own security rather than just a protected individual, Commander Whitmore noted. That partnership makes everyone safer and more effective. The palace staff, who had initially been suspicious of being investigated during the security review, had come to appreciate the thoroughness of the process and the enhanced safety it provided. Mrs. Hartwell, the head housekeeper, had become one of Charlotte's strongest supporters in recognizing the importance of vigilance in all aspects of palace operations. The princess has taught all of us to pay attention to details we might have overlooked before, she said. Her example has made everyone more aware of their role in keeping the family safe. As winter turned to spring, Charlotte resumed a more normal schedule of activities, but with enhanced awareness and continued involvement in security planning. She participated in regular briefings about potential threats and continued to provide input on security protocols, particularly those involving interactions with visitors and the handling of gifts. The crystal globe that had contained the explosive device had been preserved as evidence, but Charlotte requested that a replica be made, one that was simply a beautiful piece of crystal without any hidden dangers. She kept it in her room as a reminder of the importance of trusting her instincts and the value of speaking up when something doesn't feel right. It reminds me that beautiful things can sometimes hide dangerous secrets, she explained to her brothers when they asked about it. But it also reminds me that I was brave enough to recognize the danger and smart enough to know how to get help. The impact of Charlotte's experience extended beyond security concerns to her academic and personal development. Her teachers noted that she approached her studies with enhanced focus and seemed particularly interested in subjects like international relations, psychology, and conflict resolution. She's developed a sophisticated understanding of how different people and groups can have conflicting interests, observed Ms. Chun, her tutor. But rather than making her cynical, it seems to have made her more determined to find ways to resolve conflicts peacefully. Charlotte's charitable interests had also expanded to include organizations working to prevent radicalization and support victims of terrorism. While she was too young to take on formal roles with these organizations, her family had made donations in her name, and she had expressed interest in learning more about their work as she grew older. The experience had also strengthened the bonds within the royal family. Charlotte's brothers, initially frightened by learning about the threat to their sister, had come to admire her courage and wanted to develop similar skills in recognizing and responding to potential dangers. Charlotte showed us all what it means to be brave and smart at the same time, Prince George said during a family conversation about the experience. I want to learn how to notice things the way she does. As the first anniversary of the incident approached, Charlotte reflected on how much her life had changed since that morning when she had felt something was wrong about the man with the crystal globe. While the experience had certainly been frightening and had forced her to confront realities about the world that most children her age never needed to consider, it had also revealed strengths and capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. I learned that my feelings about people and situations are usually right, she told her parents. And I learned that even when something is scary, I can still think clearly and do what needs to be done. The lessons from Charlotte's experience had implications far beyond her personal development. Security agencies around the world had implemented new protocols for involving protected individuals, especially children, in their own security. The recognition that potential targets could be valuable partners in threat identification had revolutionized approaches to personal protection. Charlotte's story had become a powerful example of how courage, intelligence, and proper training could combine to prevent tragedy. While the specific details of her experience remain classified, the broader lessons about the importance of trusting instincts and maintaining open communication between protected individuals and their security teams had influenced policy at the highest levels. As she looked toward the future, Charlotte carried with her not just the knowledge of how to recognize and respond to threats, but also a deep appreciation for the people who work to keep her family safe and the importance of remaining vigilant in a world where dangers could hide behind the most innocent appearances. The crystal globe continued to sit on her windowsill, catching the morning light and serving as a daily reminder that even the most beautiful gifts could conceal deadly intentions, but that courage and wisdom could triumph over even the most sophisticated threats. In many ways, it had become a symbol not just of the danger she had faced, but of the strength and intelligence she had discovered within herself in meeting that challenge.